Welcome, everybody. We have a very, very special conversations for you today. And I have my beautiful mother, Jane, with me, and we have a very special guest. Mom, why don't you tell everybody who we have?
We have Trey Smith, and he is the most authentic, the most watched, he just blows us away with the documentaries that he's done, and all of the subjects that are very controversial that people actually need to hear, because it all comes from the Bible. And the Bible is the answer to it has the answers for mankind and what we are living in today. And so to have Trey here today is a special treat for Donna and I.
You're more than Jane. That's more than generous, because for me, when you two ladies wrote, I think it was Donna, and I first got to speak to you. I got a message from she was very excited that you had wrote, because we the entire time, one of the videos that I did, of course, the one that dealt with Kim and the prophecies that he had about Donald Trump.
Yes.
And after the fact, I would find more things, even as I would, look at what he said. Each little piece of it would have more prophecy embedded in it. For example, you would look at the dates, and there would be 7s or 14s, or they'd be in the year 2007 or 2014, etc. And but I had this one tape. Of your dad, Donnie, your husband, Jane. And I literally, in that year, I think it was 2016.
Yes, it was.
Early in that year, they were doing prophecy conferences. And it wasn't prophecy like your dad did. Not bad people, wonderful people. Kim had a spirit of the Lord that would flow through him, and you could feel it. You could feel it right through those cameras. I don't know which one I'm supposed to be looking at, but you could feel it as you watched it. That's different than just the dry reading of what a lot of people in prophecy were doing, was just parroting the news. They were parroting what they saw on the news. The world's going to end. It's doom and gloom, and eventually that happens.
Yes.
But that's not what Kim was stating was coming. But it was the reverse of what would make sense to the eyes.
Yes.
And at that time, I'd heard so much of that, just literally so much of that heaped on. This one's bad, the pointing the finger thing. The world's going to fall apart. Hillary's going to win. She's going to take it all. I really gripped on to that. And the more that, it wasn't me, it was the Lord that showed me, because I hadn't listened to something by Kim Clement in years.
Yes.
And here was this tape, and it was even an awful tape. Like the quality of it was horrible. You had to really look at it, it was just bad.
We got a lot of those.
But the Lord was coming through that poor quality tape, like nothing flat. And I began to show this to people. I began to show it to guys that were in some of those groups. In fact, some of the, Tom Horn listened to your husbands. I don't know that he knew who Kim was until that time.
Yes.
But he does now.
Yes.
And there were other people, little my mother, I took that tape to, once I'd finished that Trump prophecy video, which included Kim. Kim was the reason I made that.
Yes.
It was the first of its kind. There was no other full-length prophecy thing. I don't think there's anything even afterwards.
No.
But it was certainly the first that did that to such a degree that even people from Ultra... Go ahead.
Tell people the title of it and how they can find it, because I want people to see it.
You type in Trump prophecy and you're going to find it.
And YouTube, it's there.
Yes, and it
Trump
heavily,
prophecies, right?
Trump prophecy of Trump.
Yes.
And in fact, these other named people, like you'll hear the name Mark Taylor quite a bit at this point now.
Yes.
Guess how you hear the name Mark Taylor? Because I used a clip of him in that Trump prophecy video.
Oh, that's right. I remember. Yes, you did.
That's he was on Rick Wiles' show, but Joe Horn and Tom Horn, they didn't know who he was. Joe Horn, in fact, I was sitting with him a few weeks ago, and he said, "Trey, I have to tell you something." He said, "Had it not been for Clement and that tape you made,
Yes.
nobody ever would have heard of Mark Taylor." So what I'm telling you as I sit at this glass table right now is that man, and other people, including Mark Taylor, who had said these things, without your husband and your father, Clement, you would have never heard those prophecies.
No.
Yes.
And I believed Kim because of my mother, who was she's ultra. In my family, my father is ultra intellectual, and my mother is ultra spiritual.
Yes.
How they get along, I have no idea.
You know about
it's
that.
hard to watch. It's
That's
painful.
how
It's
come you are
painful to
you.
watch.
This
It's
is how
painful.
come you are you.
Yes. I've been living this the whole time. It's been awful. It's been a horrible experience. But here's where she would go. But I'll tell you this: my mother is somebody you would go to. I have seen people intellectualize their way into idiocy.
Yes.
And
My
that's
dad
often-
talked about that. My dad
Well,
talked
and that's
about
what was
that.
happening at the prophecy stuff. And wonderful people, the most wonderful people on earth, and they can come up with the smartest stuff. And it can be really elaborate with lots of charts and things, and it can be really, really wrong. Because because you get one thing wrong, you've got it all wrong.
The whole thing. Yeah.
You know what my dad would say? He said, "Don't be so earthly minded that you're spiritually blind."
And that's it right there.
Yeah.
And if you can't feel the Spirit in it, even if the Spirit in it is all over the place, if the Lord's moving through them, you can trust it in its general direction.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean it might not stumble this way
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
a little bit. But I tell you what, you bet on that every time.
Yes.
And that's what I banked on. I would bank on my mother used to work over there at Enron before it fell.
Yes.
Yes.
And I swear to God, right when they split up, my parents separated for a time, and she worked over at Enron, and she was there for maybe like 10 years, and she would buy their big employee package thing.
Yes.
Right? You had guys jumping out of windows and stuff at Enron, when it fell, because everybody's stocks went down. Of course, if you bought those employee things, which my mom was buying the big one. Well, I've got other family members that are supposedly, financial, wizards or whatever.
Yes.
Well, my mom comes in one day. She says, "Well, I got rid of all that Enron stock." What are you crazy? That's supposed to skyrocket. Well, I don't know. I just felt like I was supposed to. It couldn't have been a month or two later that thing fell down. And she might have been the only one. She was out car shopping. She might have been the only one that made out from Enron.
So
it wasn't
she's
like worlds of money, but it was quite. But it was a lot. She would have lost all of it. And
Very perceptive of her.
she got healed of cancer one time.
Really?
Yeah, when I gave my mom your dad's tape and said, "Is Trump gonna win?" and Mom came back and said, "Yes," uploaded. It's like a sure.
Because Trey uploaded the Trump video before the election.
Beforehand, and
so
a lot,
it was a leap
and
of faith for you to do that.
Trump had just started. I don't even know if he'd started running yet at the point that I started. I mean, he was talking about it, but we weren't even to the point where there were panels of 9 jillion dudes, But the Lord put Trump in there.
Yeah.
And your husband called it. And up until the last hour, on the day of the election. Oh, you know what the gambling odds were against Trump? You'll never guess. 7-1 in Europe.
My Lord.
Can you believe that? 7-1.
7 again.
I was really jealous. Michael, I wish I would have thought of it first, because Michael put in a bunch of money out there in Europe. I was amazed they pay him. Yeah, the odds were. So if you put $1 in, and technically you'd get 8 back.
Yes.
Which is the number of new beginnings,
Yeah,
right?
it is. That's very interesting, too.
Yes.
Huh.
Isn't it?
Number of new beginnings. And now we're in the 2018. The year 2018.
Yes.
That's also the number of new beginnings.
You better believe it.
It's a new beginning for for the body of Christ. We've moved into a new season. And the great thing, the most unbelievable thing that you told me was Billy Graham was born in 1918 and he died in 2018.
Wow.
So that's pretty significant.
It is.
The fact that it's a defining point in history for us as the body of Christ.
Yes.
It is something about it is spiritual. We know that he's going to die at 99. Like one person said on one of the posts, well, didn't you expect him to die? He is 99 years old. Well, yes, we did. But the fact is that he took so long. He was the last, just exactly what Kim prophesied.
Dad said. My dad's prophesied.
He was the last. And it reminded me of Methuselah, who was the last before the flood. He was the very last. And Methuselah means, what does it mean, Christy? My death will bring judgment. But now I don't believe that it's judgment on Christians.
What did Kim say?
What did Kim say?
Yes, what did Kim say? Kim had giant prophecies about Billy Graham.
He did. He said it was to a generation. It will be evangelism to the next generation. Just like what Billy Graham...
Like Oral Roberts as well was another one he spoke about.
There were a big five. Big five, right?
Yes, the big five.
And the thing is, I believe that my dad
I
was
just
included.
wanted to go to heaven. You have to understand that. Kim's gone to heaven. I would have loved the rapture to happen and I go to heaven too. But it wasn't to be.
But that's out of your grief and wanting to be with Daddy.
That's out of grief.
But what was interesting to me is that my father was seeing that these pivotal, great men of God would die, and specifically Billy Graham would be the last, and that when that happened, it would bring about this great new move of the Spirit. Or revival, if you want to call it that. My dad was careful about using the word revival. He didn't use it often.
Why was this? Why was
Because he felt like revive means you're dead and I have to revive you.
And he felt like the word had been abused. Used too much. Overused. Overused. We're just having a revival. We're having a revival. We're having a revival.
Yeah, what does it mean?
What does it really mean? And so what he was careful to use the word revival, but he did in this case. And in other prophecies where he wasn't talking about Billy Graham, but he was seeing this great move of the Spirit, even in the Middle East.
Move of the Spirit. I think he used that a lot more.
Yes. What he was saying, but he did say revival too. And I've gone through so many of the prophecies, and he saw even in the Middle East that the youth would rise up from the Middle East, and that there would be a great move of God in the Middle East, in China, in these countries, in the youth, not in the corrupt leadership, not in the old generation, but the new generation. He also saw that there would be a combining of sounds from in music, so Middle Eastern music with Western music, and he actually, a number of times during the broadcasts, sort of tried to replicate what he was hearing in the Spirit, and would do sort of like a Middle Eastern sound, and then have, like Charlie and Dave play some kind of bluesy Western style on the side, and combine the sounds, because he saw in the future, and he also saw a Latino influence.
Yes.
That the combining in the youth, the combining of these sounds in music.
That this would be a global thing.
Yes, that's what he was saying.
And this would follow the five.
Yes.
The five. Well, and that's the number of grace.
And I believe my father was one of those in the prophetic.
Well, Jane, I guess you're here for one last hurrah.
Well, we're in the dispensation of grace now. And at some point, the dispensation of grace comes to an end. So I believe we are living in the end days, because the state of Israel, from the state of Israel to whenever, however long it takes, for Methuselah to have lived 969 years, the longest man to live on planet Earth, shows the grace of God, because God didn't want to bring the flood.
Yeah.
He didn't want to bring it. So Methuselah lived a long time, which depicts the grace of God to such a degree.
That's very interesting.
Yes. And then the other thing about it is Billy Graham. He lives the longest.
He lives so long, yes.
He lives the longest. So the point being
The
made
parallel
here
there, yeah.
is the fact that God's grace is so unbelievable to humanity that he extends the life of somebody to that age because he's trying to show you his love for us as human beings.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Could I speculate?
Yes, speculate.
In like an overview, what in your dad's tapes, this okay, at the end times, it would make sense. It would seem like God to let there be an enormous, and you would need somebody like Trump. You would need somebody lifting Israel.
Right. That's right.
To get any of these events. And lifting Israel up is going to make the Middle East mad.
That's right.
Well, it's hard not to make those people mad, but that's going to make them extra mad. And in the mix of that she would have a wave of that the Lord would go ahead and give everybody a last opportunity.
Yes.
Even the weird people like me.
Absolutely.
Because you know what, the Lord loves the weird people.
Well, that's what
The weird
Daddy
people.
saw when he broke his wrist.
This is about the free gift.
Yes.
God's free gift. This is what this is the law. I mean, we don't have to educate the people now. We just need to get them to heaven, basically. We need to make sure that people, I mean, they may not understand the Bible like we do. We've gone in depth, we've studied it, we understand the patterns, the whole thing.
The Spirit of the Lord is what they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
We understand
And
everything about it.
remember what my father said about returning to the basics of apostolic Christianity.
Yes.
He said that on the last
What do you think that
broadcast. And I think it's that simple spreading of the gospel. I actually posted this on my Facebook page late last night. 2 Timothy 4, verse 3 and 4, where it talks about, somebody read it to me. What is it? I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim off the top of my head. 2 Timothy 3, verse 4, do the NIV. Because last night, I posted this because I was sitting praying last night by myself. Because I watched this amazing clip of Dad where it was back quite a few years ago in 2012. And he was taken up as he was worshiping, and he was hearing the sound of the language of angels, and and you could see the effect on it. I'll show you this. I watched it last night. I found it randomly, and you see the effect on him where he was actually a little bit confused, and he was saying, "Look, somebody's going to have to do something because I need a minute." And he's live on the den, and somebody saying something or did something to give him a minute to gather his composure, and he said, look, I'm going to have to unpack what has just happened to me, what I've downloaded into my spirit in this moment. And he was visibly shaken. He called it the consequence of the sacred filling of the soul. And I have another video clip of him back in 2013 where he talks about that and King David. Okay, what? For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine.
For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires.
Instead, to suit their own desires.
They will gather around them a great number of teachers.
They will gather around them a great number of teachers. To say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth.
And turn aside to myths.
And turn aside to myths. And
wow.
That really spoke to me because I felt like, look at the news media. Look at the world right now. This isn't just about, I just feel like there is that pattern going on across the board. In the church, outside of the church, everywhere in the world. There's this sort of that pattern and to return to the basics of something is to return to the simplicity of it. And the simplicity of the gospel, which is, if you just look at the message of Jesus Christ, if you just simply follow that simple, beautiful message, forget about everything else that we've, like you just said, we've studied it, we've gone through it, we've gone through timelines and details and all these things. But what is that simple, basic message? And that's something that he said that day on the last day, and that really stuck with me, and it just comes back to me all the time.
No structure can exceed.
Yes.
Can exceed its grounding.
The foundation.
Yeah. The foundation of its.
Your foundation is on the rock.
Yes. And I just thought of something while you were stating that because you're coming into what I see and the stuff that I do and kind of the emails that we sort of get. The spiritual has to be grounded with the Word and tested against it, because and that's an overwhelming last thing for your dad to say, because there's people that believe they have romantic encounters with all sorts of things
going on, yeah.
And I think that there's an ultra spiritualism, this kind of hour of the evolution,
mythical kind of weird stuff.
Yes.
Well, yes, sort of like you had in the past.
Yes.
It's almost appropriate that God would have at the end. Choose this day who you serve.
That's
which God? And that could apply to which. In fact, Jesus, the Antichrist, that means instead of Christ, pseudo-Christ.
Yes.
I come in my Father's name. Me you won't accept. Another comes in his own name. He you will accept. That's what Jesus said.
Yes.
So it's in that sense of ultra spiritualism. There's got to be discernment, but you know what? The people just need the Spirit of God, that's what Kim had, and that's what's taken place. And this is to even sit in this room. Some of the most powerful words that have ever been given in all of history
on this platform.
Yes, happened right here.
That's right.
Right here in this place.
But you know what? Another
moves
thing.
of spirit.
But another thing that my dad kept speaking about and making comparisons with was Elijah, the prophet Elijah, and the prophets of Baal. And how long will you be of two minds? It's something that we repeated over and over again, and that's something you see in our world right now too. Is how long will you be of two minds? How long will you be so divided? And everywhere you look, it's just division. Just like people can't even talk to each other anymore, and that's a really it's not a good thing. And so I like to encourage communication, and you're never going to 100% agree with everybody. You're never going to 100% agree. You and I are never going to 100% agree on anything, but we can discuss things that we can learn from.
Donnie and I don't agree, but we.
But we can.
Now, what are you
talk.
getting at? What didn't we agree on?
No, there's nothing we didn't agree on. But it's an overall problem I'm seeing in society in general is that the lack of communication. Stop it. The lack of communication, the inability to communicate, and this wall between two sides where we can't even talk to each other it's almost like you're not even allowed to say certain things, and that's
what he was
really
seeing.
dangerous. And he was seeing that. How long will you be of two minds? And he compared the spirit of Baal to the spirit that's driving these extremist terrorist groups. He's called it Baal Allah. He actually termed it that. And when he was sick, I started praying against the spirit of Baal Allah. And I put myself into a situation where I think spiritually I wasn't prepared for. And I start praying against Baal Allah, Baal Allah. Next thing, I'm sick. I'm having ocular migraines. Like there was an instant physical attack on me when I said that name and prayed against it. So what my father called it was an ancient spirit that was rearing its head via the Muslim extremists and the terrorists. And so I just thought it was an interesting thing that he kept repeating.
Well, he was talking about there was one of the I skipped through quite a few prophecies. There were so many things that I would have liked to have covered. In that Trump video and the follow-up that I did afterwards, there were a lot of things your dad said, but I wanted to narrow it down to just hey,
the most
look,
important.
look here. But he was talking about Russia. He was talking about Iran. He was talking about Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
He was also talking about that Korean kid out there.
Little Kim. He called himself. My dad called him Little
Rocket
Kim.
Man.
Trump's calling him Rocket Man.
I think that's what they call him.
Yeah, that is what they call him.
But these are all players that have come into action, and your dad referred to Putin and the games that he would play. I think he referred to him as sort of this junkyard dog, which is an interesting title to come from, because that's sort of the bulldog person. You can see this when you look at Putin. You're like, that is the junkyard dog. But you have battles that are from a biblical perspective. If you were entering the end times, most end times guys would kind of perceive that you are going to have Russia meddling in here with the Middle East, and particularly that would be Saudi Arabia and Iran. One of them, Saudi Arabia is Sunni and Iran is Shiite. Now, what that means, an easy way to remember that. The Sunnis they got the palaces, they've got the oil, they've got the Ferraris, they want to keep all that stuff. Because guys that have got that stuff, and they've got the girls. So, and if the Mahdi shows up, they've got to give all that to the Mahdi. He owns that now. Nobody's in a rush for that. Take your time showing up, man. Now, if you're in Iran, you've got none of that. Right? No Ferraris, no pretty women, none of it. You're in a rush for the Mahdi to come. Come on. Come on, Mahdi. Come on. So they're the ones that blow people up. So when you're talking about extremists, they're the ones without the Ferraris. Okay, that's an easy way to remember that.
The ones without the Ferraris.
They're the ones without the Ferraris.
And the gold cars and the diamond studded vehicles.
Absolutely. So these two parties, the Sunnis and the Shiites, they're going to figure out who's in charge. And you've got the youngest prince in the world, and this comes following your father's prophecies about this stuff. You've got Russia over here. Now, Russia is pushing for the Shiites because they're crazy and they're easy to push. Why not? It's nearly free to push them. And Saudi Arabia, with its new young king, and Donald Trump has funded this kid to the hilt because this kid wants a piece of Iran. And Iran wants a piece of him. So I'm guessing what your dad meant by cats and dogs with the junkyard dog that's, in the mix of this. It sounds an awful lot like the Gog-Magog war. But he also said, well, these two parties have got to clash with each other. Islam doesn't like it. Before Islam can start working its way through the infidels, it's really got to figure out who's in charge. Who owns the Ferraris? Okay, who owns the Ferrari? Straight up, who owns the Ferrari? We're cutting heads. We want to know whose Ferrari it is. That's it. Russia wants to know too, because Russia's really the one that's going to end up with the Ferrari. That's the funny thing. Or they'd like to.
Well,
that's the plan.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan. But you really need these to culminate. But what I was hearing your father say is during this time that the cats and dogs are fighting it out, that there would be a lifting of America.
Yes.
Not because America was wonderful. America's not wonderful. But
hãy cứ trân trọng xung quanh ta, cười lên ngày mai đã đến. Ta cảm ơn cuộc đời đã cho ta thấy bình minh, hạnh phúc là đây, tìm kiếm đâu chỉ xa vời, có nhiều đây được rồi, không cần cao sâu. Hãy bên anh em nhé, hạnh phúc ở đây mà, tìm làm chi xa vời, hạnh phúc bên cạnh anh. Hãy nhắm mắt lắng nghe con tim.
because America really does
If you think about the
love the
wisdom-
Lord.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
hard. And
Yes.
it's
In
hard
God
enough.
we trust.
Even in its stupidity,
Yeah.
we actually do love the Lord.
Yes.
And it's based on Judeo-Christian foundation. Western
Because we'll
civilization is
actually
based on
run-
Judeo-Christian
because
foundation.
even though we get ourselves in lots of trouble,
Yeah.
we don't actually run to Allah. We run to Jesus.
Yes.
Yes. We
And,
actually do.
yeah.
And
yeah,
that is,
And like Kim used to say to me, Jane, the rest of the world are doing worse things than the United States of America. At least the United States of America has sent missionaries and fed people all over the world.
Yeah.
I don't think that God is distinguishing between countries. His distinction is between Christians and the world, not as individual countries.
Yeah.
This is a separate thing. It's completely separated. It's his judgment comes at a certain time. The certain time is that 7-year period. That 7-year period that the book of Revelation speaks about is the end of the world. And God has given us this time. He's given us, we're living under the dispensation of grace. Until the dispensation of grace ends, I don't believe that God is judging America, Australia, New Zealand. He said there'd be earthquakes. He said there'd be famines. He said there'd be diverse problems and stuff around the world. He never said to a specific country.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a specific country, that's where I have the problem. So the Bible as a whole, we can see the plan of God. We see the plan of God. His plan is to redeem mankind. And it's a free gift, and whoever says yes to him, he's going to pick them up.
yes.
And we will go through trials and tribulations.
Well, Dad often said there will always be wars. There will always be these things. And actually, remember I sent you that video not long ago of Daddy speaking about Israel, and he said there's always war. There's always tremble when the peace treaties are made. Is what he
That
said.
would be one of the big things, wouldn't it?
That would be.
That
He
would be
said
one of
when
the
you
big
hear
things.
peace
And we'll
treaties
probably
being
close,
signed,
but I don't
we
think it's
should tremble.
tomorrow.
No.
No.
This is okay. So this is actually what I was kind of getting from. This is what I think is that the Lord is going to give everybody one last opportunity. To
Yes, like
come
my
to Him.
dad
And
said
how
that.
long that window of time means.
We don't know that when the end of that grace happens.
I don't think it's horribly long, but I
No.
don't think it's
Next week.
You know,
If
Could
it
be.
is
Maybe it
next
is.
week, I'll
You
be
know-
very
you know
happy.
what
Watch me say that in the...
You know, we're close. Jane is angling to go for it next
Yes,
week.
I am. Yes.
My friend Scotty wanted it to be a few months back, and the And Scott is such a nice guy
He
that
is.
the Lord probably considered it for him. And, oh, man.
Poor Scotty.
Yes, I bet he did. But Scotty had some good points. They're
Scotty
just-
had tons of, he was
he
a
really
wonderful
does.
man.
He really does. He did have he does have good points.
he
I
loved
think
them.
that,
His intellectualism got him. I'm
Probably.
telling you, I'm just
Don't
telling
be so
you.
earthly minded.
I'm just,
So my
I'm just
father
telling
said.
you. I'm just telling you.
You see, because
He's-
my dad was just, so,
Dad would have been like you.
yeah, he would have. And
He called me his little Beamer, and he called me his little Shemitah.
Shemitah.
He used to make fun of things, but in a nice way.
Because he was a
'Cause he
was
liked the
he had a good
dialogue.
sense of
this
humor.
place is too serious without it. I mean, it
Yeah,
is.
he
It
had a
is.
good. My dad had a good sense of humor. He was a very down to earth guy, so you could talk to him about things and not, he knew how to speak to all different kinds of people in all different walks of life.
You have to have humor and be able to discuss things and not get so serious about it.
Yes, and that goes back to what I'm saying is that we have a real problem in society at large, not just in the United States, but globally, where people cannot talk to each other anymore. Because there's these ideologies, people aren't thinking, and you know what, it really boils down to individual responsibility. And it doesn't matter how many groups you try to put people in, you can put people in as many groups as you want. No matter what happens, you're going to have people in those groups who make good choices and bad choices. You're going to have people who are more good and more bad, and that's what it boils down to, is good and evil, and the choice of good and evil. And that goes way back all the way to Adam and Eve.
That's
And
a
so
simple
you try to
message of
put
Jesus.
group people into race or religion or whatever you want, political party, doesn't matter. Because you can't just blanket people. And I think that's really part of what part of Christ's message was the focus on the individual. That you have an individual relationship with him, that you are responsible for the choices that you
Work out
make.
your salvation with fear
Yes.
and trembling.
And that's
Work it out
that's
for
kind of
yourself.
just kind of the way I just see it, just as a general, because I keep trying to pull myself back and look at the big picture and what's going on. And even with my father's life, and looking at his prophecies and looking at what he was saying, because he would get something like with Trump. He got Trump will be a trumpet in 2007. He wasn't a fan of Trump. He didn't know very much about Trump. Just came out of it in the middle of prophesying. He said Trump will be a trumpet. And then but he didn't know Trump was going to, in 2007 when he said that, he didn't know Trump was going to be the president. He just saw that Trump would be the trumpet. And slowly, because the way it works is...
2007. Notice the years.
Yes.
And then in 2014, you got, in fact, the day that we're sitting here, this is February
It's February 22nd today, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 4 years ago,
And you
today.
used to see the 11:11 on the clocks
Yes,
all the
Dad,
time.
and I
There's
always looking
millions
for that.
I'm telling you, everybody from rock stars to,
Yes.
and there's a lot of, particularly in Christianity. I tell you this about Christianity. You get to know the Christian groups, you'll find out why the atheists became atheists. It
Yes.
wasn't because they loved Charles Darwin.
My
that
dad
much.
knew that well.
But if there's not people against you, then you're not doing something right.
Yeah, that's something else my dad
And the
would have
Lord
said.
does speak, just like your dad said. The Lord does. In fact, you say it. You said earlier. In fact, in the back room, you said God will find you in the strangest of places.
Yes.
And that includes the rock and roll people,
Yes,
the weird guy, this dude
God
over here.
sent my father to all those people, just like I was telling you about Prince and how he sent him, how he ended up, you know, having an opportunity to prophesy over Prince. And many other you know, world leaders, celebrities. God sent him into all sorts of places, and I'd made I was saying to you, and this is how he described it to me. It's like when Jesus covered himself up and went into the crowd and no one knew who he was, and then when he was in the middle of the crowd, he unveiled himself and revealed who he was. And it's almost like that. It's that you can move into, and this is what my dad was talking about, in being prophetic in your job, in the marketplace, in the world, wherever you're going. You carry that message in you, and God will put you into positions where you have an opportunity to influence a life that maybe no one else could have influenced that person. And you know, if you are clean cut in your suit and you're perfect and you're a perfect Christian and you're not going to taint yourself by hanging out with or speaking to anybody who is a sinner, that's the opposite of the Christian message, because Jesus went, and this was my dad's things too, was touch the untouchable, reach the unreachable. That was another, there you go, Johnny, there's another saying, touch the untouchable, reach the unreachable.
This was, Clement, this was he was the prophet of this past generation.
Yes.
He was.
He was.
And it's just, so for me personally to sit here, and that's why I'm very happy that I did that, because I was a little nervous that, but I think what that one tape and that example. So in past things I'd put together something. Hey, here's why evolution doesn't work. Boom, 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 boom. In the thing that I believe the Lord asked me to, which was really to honor your father, your husband. In fact, I was praying he would live, but similar to that evolution tape, what it shows is boom, 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 boom. The Lord speaks through people today.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, the mouths that spoke against your husband.
Yes, there were many.
The mouths that spoke against those. I didn't see those on that Trump prophecy video.
No.
I didn't see them popping up. Because even the mouths that snap, they shut up at the moment they know they're in trouble, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're proud. Oh, I hope he's right.
Yes.
Yes.
But he was right. And what's nice about him, because see, it would have been meaningless if it looked like Trump was winning.
Yes.
Would have been absolutely up until the day.
You didn't know.
No, well, you thought she was winning. They kept telling you that.
Okay.
She's winning. She's winning. She's winning. They were playing mental warfare with you, and they came to believe it. They came to believe. I tell you, I remember I came back home, and I wasn't going to look at the news or anything, and then I bailed on that. And right when I turned it on, they were all laughing at how stupid it was that Trump had won.
Wow.
And suddenly my phone began ringing, and it was and Michael Scrumborn, the one that he actually bet all the money that he had. Not that he had worlds, but he was the guy in the UK. He had trusted Kim so much that he bet all his money on it, and the odds were 7-1. Well, this is what he said, because I looked over at him, and he was looking at all these slips, and I was like, Michael, you look so nervous. He's like, yeah, no, stop, let me just watch. and he's looking at his slips like this, you know. And I was like, well, Michael, how much did you bet? And he was like, well, I went down to the office. I may have placed a bet. And then I figured, well, since I already bet that much, why not bet some more? And then pretty soon I figured, I'm already in trouble if I lose this. So why not place another one? And he was like ecstatic. I've never seen anybody that happy. My chair is leaving me, but I'm so excited. But here's the thing is that
Oh, my Lord.
I remember that moment and the looks on, and some of those liberal shows, and they're dropping their heads in their hands. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm fighting with this chair, but
what's happening to this chair?
Well, I don't know. It's the devil coming against me.
Yes, it is.
Because it's a good part. But here's where I'm sitting there and I'm watching those screens turn from blue to red. And yes, the Lord handed us, and mercy is undeserved kindness. It's favor.
Yes.
And Yeah, we've got a president. Your dad used the term Joseph period. And
And he
that would
thought-
mean 7
he
years.
said that he's going to win.
We've talked about that too.
You will have two terms.
You will have at your helm for 2 terms.
That
And
term
and him seeing the walls of protection around the nation, and they'll say he has hot blood. And I mean, these are very specific things far before the time.
Oh, it's unarguable. A Joseph period.
Joseph.
If we're in the end times, what happened in a Joseph period? Joseph period lasts for about 7 years, right? And the storehouses were good. And then after that, now it's not that things go immediately bad, because you've got to remember, Egypt was okay. And Egypt's a pagan empire, right? They're where the pyramid is, where the eye is, man.
Yeah.
Right? Egypt got its prosper because Joseph was there
Yes.
in a Joseph time period.
Yes.
And then when the famine came, Egypt, that pagan nation, actually had enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of its neighbors, just like your husband
Because
was
of
saying,
Joseph.
Saudi Arabia, I'm going to prosper the very nation that they hate. All of the neighboring nations had to come buy their grain from
Yes,
Egypt.
yes.
The Antichrist, or the Pharaoh that knew not Joseph, was able to come, not because of famine,
No.
but because of prosper.
That's right.
And the place of the pyramid with the eye on top.
Dad even prophesied about the hardening of the
sounded
heart
nice,
of
didn't it?
Pharaoh.
I made all that up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, but my dad did speak about, I've hardened your heart the way I hardened the heart of Pharaoh. I think he was referring to Moses at the time. But I remember him saying that, is that sometimes God does things in order to get a particular outcome. So you have the hardening of the heart of Pharaoh. And so that really stuck out to me when you said that now. But also what you were saying about Joseph, because the funny thing is that I was going to school. I had gone back to school, and I was studying about ancient Egypt in a humanitarians class. So it was more on the artsy side of things. But in the middle of taking this class, and I wrote this whole thing to my dad and sent it to him, as we studied about this Jewish man, what was with this particular pharaoh, and now I'm forgetting the names of the pharaohs or whatever. But it just struck me in my heart about the 7 years of grace. My dad prophesied of 7 years of grace, and how Joseph stored up the grain. And he saw the 7 fat years and the 7 lean years. So you store up your grain in the 7 fat years, so that in the 7 lean years. And I even remember my dad saying how even though it was bad times, we did not have bad times, because a similar thing had happened during the financial crash and stuff. And I kind of see, and I'm not even sure exactly the details, but there is that story of Joseph that keeps coming up inside of me, of the 7 fat years and the 7 lean years. And I'm looking at where we are now, and we've got Trump, and Dad prophesied 2 terms of Trump. And I think it's a very important time for Christians and for the body of Christ right now.
I don't even think Donald Trump knows that he's going to win a second time. He doesn't know.
Well, we're going to...
There's a lot he doesn't know. God's
I don't
using
think
him without him
he
knowing how
even-
much he's using him.
Well, hopefully you're going to be called, and hopefully there's, hopefully these tapes that you pulled. I bet he doesn't know a lot of things.
My dad did prophesy that at some point, and I've got to find that one again too, is that the next president, he said, will expose things without meaning to, without knowing what he's doing.
Yes.
And so
The
just
next
his,
one after this one.
no, he was
This
talking
one.
about Trump. This was years
Yeah.
ago that he prophesied, and he was talking about whoever the next president is going to expose things without people
Without even realizing.
without even realizing or
He's
meaning to. And look at how much exposure has come out just from him being in office. There's just the whole Me Too movement, and this is on both the Republican and the Democratic side. And what my dad prophesied and said was, so that there will be no more corruption in the White House. So you see it just going from the bottom just all the way up. And same in Hollywood. There's all these exposures of all this corruption is just coming out all over the place.
Very,
And it's not
very sick
Trump
stuff.
is not
That goes back to those very spirits
Yes.
you're talking. It's all child
And
stuff.
Trump is not orchestrating any of that. His mere presence is bringing it out, because you have this outsider who's not part of the club, who doesn't want to play the game, who's not versed in being a politician and speaking like a politician and being a soothsayer and knowing how to put on the mask. He doesn't know how to do any of that. He sits there and he tweets at 5 o'clock in the morning and everybody has a heart attack. I think it's the most, I like
That's
that he
actually
tweets.
funny, isn't it?
I like it.
Oh, I love him
Look,
too.
I don't agree with everything he says all the time, but at least I know what he's thinking.
I love it when
I
he
can
told
wake
the
up in the
Korean
morning, I
kid-
know what my president's thinking.
Yes.
And then I can say I like it or I don't like it, but at least I can see it.
You remember when the Korean kid, he says, I've got a button here with a missile on it, and then Trump tweets back, mine's bigger.
I know, that is just...
Mine's bigger and it works. I think is what he said.
Yes,
Mine's
he did
bigger
that.
and it
He
works.
said, mine's bigger
It's
and it works.
priceless. I
Yes,
mean,
that's priceless.
Okay,
Yeah,
a regular seasoned politician would never have done that.
and you know it destroyed that guy's week.
Oh, yes, it did.
Oh, man, he was sitting. He
That
didn't get out
guy's
of
week
bed.
deserved to be
He
destroyed.
was wearing those gothic
Much
outfits
more.
and,
Yes.
whipping
Yes,
people or something back
absolutely.
there.
Probably.
Probably worse than that. But
Well, this has been a really great, really wonderful conversation, Trey, and I know that we're going to have some more of these, because we're definitely going to have you back. We're going to have you Skype in, because I'm going to want to hear your
This was
opinion.
an honor.
Yeah, and I want to hear your opinion and your thoughts on things, because I really, after meeting you now and getting to know you more, I think we're on the same page, all of us, and I think
Yes.
your insights sometimes are going to be very helpful for us, and
Yes,
so I can't wait to have you back and
This
hear
was
what
an
you have to say as we see more and more of this unfold, and we can regroup and talk again. And as always, I love having my mother with me, and so thank you both for joining me for this conversation. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we love you all.